Thanks everybody for coming. I want to talk about a pretty substantial campaign that we did last year for our top game, which is called Summoner's War. As of right now, it's a top 3 grossing game in Germany and France. It's a top 10 game in the US, and it is actually more successful outside of Korea than in Korea, which is pretty outstanding for a Korean company, which we are. We publish under the brands of Gameville and Come To Us. As I said, our most successful game is Summoner's War. Other titles that we do are Major League Baseball, Dragon Blaze, Critica, which are all a little bit less known in the West, but doing pretty well in Korea. And last year we did a pretty big branding campaign for Summoner's War, which is kind of unusual in the mobile space. I think it's becoming more and more frequent, and so I want to share the experience that we had with this campaign, doing all kinds of different channels, and I just want to share the insights about TV, out of home, and influencer marketing, which I think are new for a lot of people, and I just want to share our learnings with you. So we did this campaign in summer and autumn of last year. We did a pretty high-profile TV spot with Dave Franco and Alison Brie. We did out-of-home advertising. This is Times Square in New York. We also did Paris and Cologne during Gamescom. We also did a lot of influencer videos. Anybody know this guy? Anybody from France? You don't count? If you're French, you should know this guy. The dark-haired guy is called Amixem. He gets about 1 million views on his videos. He's a pretty good video gaming influencer on YouTube. And then, of course, we also did the YouTube masthead, and we did a lot of, performance-based UA. By the way, if you're wondering why my YouTube looks so crappy, this is what happens when you go into influencer marketing and research influencers by yourself. So let me just show you the TV spot that we did, which aired in summer last year.
Hey, watch where you're going.
Oh, I am. And it's right through you. Team up?
Yeah.
So the whole idea of the campaign was to have Dave and Alison have their individual team, and then they kind of fight against each other, but also team up. We wanted to introduce the individual mons that we have in our game and make them a little bit more prominent. So we did character vignettes for the particular monsters that we seeded starting in July, and then we worked up to the full TV spot that you just saw. We actually have about 3-minute version of this that we shared online. And we booked this in Germany, France, and the US, starting around Gamescom and then after, working up towards a substantial update for the game in September. So when I'm showing you all this, you're probably wondering about these 3 questions. And I want to address all these questions a little bit, at least for the branding part, because I think the normal UA is fairly familiar by now. So I'm just going to walk you through TV, out-of-home, and influencer marketing a little bit, and then after we can go into more details when you have questions. So the TV part for us was pretty straightforward. We've been doing TV since 2015. We work with a TV agency here in Berlin. We also have a different agency in the US. And while it seems to be very expensive to do TV, it's actually quite efficient if you do it right. And of course, we were spending pretty big, especially for this campaign, but you can actually do relatively meaningful TV campaigns starting at maybe 25 to 50K for, let's say, a month period, depending on what kind of channels you target and what kind of audience you're looking for. So this was actually, let's say, the most unproblematic part of the campaign for us, because we've had a lot of familiarity with TV for the last 2 years. When we started doing TV, Summoner's War was a top 20 game in Germany and France. And as I said, it's now a top 3 game. At the time, it was like a top 10 title. So we see that it works. You can measure TV relatively accurately because you know when the TV spots are on air. And then you just look at your installs and kind of remove all the paid UA and everything you can attribute somewhere. And then you look at your installs that are left and then kind of figure out the uplift from the TV spot. It's not 100% exact, but it's relatively accurate and gives you a pretty good idea, and you can work out a CPI for every different channel and even every different placement that you run on TV. For out of home, it's a little bit different. Out of home, we did starting in Cologne for Gamescom. We took over all the central station in Cologne. We had 8 of these really, really big banners. We had a lot of billboards. We had a lot of different out-of-home placements. And out-of-home is hard to measure. It's actually almost impossible. You cannot really attribute installs or performance directly to that. But for us, it was important to do it because we wanted to make a statement around Gamescom. We wanted to validate the brand of Summoner's War. We wanted to show our fans and our players that come to Cologne for Gamescom that we are there. And we saw a lot of sharing on social media. We saw people getting very excited about seeing their game in Cologne. All the German players that we have, they were like, oh, nice. Look at these banners, and then they would share that on Facebook. That was pretty nice for us. When it comes to booking out-of-home advertising, I would say there's a lot of things to consider, and it gets very, very complicated. And if you do it directly with the companies that sell out-of-home, which in Germany are Ströer and Wall-Deco, they're kind of the main vendors for this, you need to be very strong and confident in what you want to buy. And you shouldn't just follow their sales pitch, but you should really look at the individual placements that you're buying. So if we do this again, we will probably be a lot more choosy about what billboards and what positions we're buying. One thing they try to do is they sell you a package. So if you want to, let's say, have a banner at all the bus stations, then they'll be like, okay, you have to buy all these 50 bus stations, and they are one rotation, and you can only buy this, and it'll be like 20 days, and you can only buy this. But then later they would offer us, hey, of those 50 stations, we can now give you 20 for a shorter amount because they're kind of left over. So you can negotiate a lot. And it is also very, very important to really understand what you're buying. So what we didn't do, which in hindsight wasn't that smart, is we didn't actually go to Cologne and look at the placements before we bought them, which wouldn't have been that hard for us because we're here in Berlin. It's not a long trip. So that's something we would definitely do different this time. We would just go and have them take us on a tour and show us every individual billboard. Because some of the things we bought, even though they weren't that expensive, looked kind of sad. Because, you know, some billboards end up being in some off-street, dead-end street in the back, which is not really what you want. So you just want to be very choosy. And I would say it's probably worth considering working with an agency or a partner that you really trust on this, just so they can take out this hassle. Like if you can't go to Cologne or to Paris or wherever you want to do your out-of-home, but you have an agency that you trust and that is also invested in you as a client, then it's probably very good to work with them. And then now I'm coming to the most fun bit, which was influencer marketing. These guys are from Rocket Jump in the US. They did a really, really nice video for us where our Mons were in like a Mon daycare setting, and they were all fighting with each other in this kind of kindergarten, and then a big dragon comes at the end and blows everything up. That was a pretty cool video for us. We looked at this influencer campaign as more of a branding play. I think when you do influencer marketing, you have to consider 2 different things. One is just, ROI, return on investment, having something that just gives you a lot of installs where you maybe don't care so much about the content. That's easier to book. If you want to do a branding play that is a lot more involved, where you really want to think about your messaging, it was very hard for us to do. And it is definitely something we would do very differently from now on. So our experience with this influencer campaign was we invited a few agencies. We gave them a briefing. We told them, look, we want to do this branding thing for Summoner's War. We want to put our Mons in the spotlight. We want to do something really cool with your artists. And then they all came back to us with different proposals. And it didn't really work out for us in the end. I think a better approach would have been for us to find a specific influencer where we're like, okay, we want to work with this guy. And then we should have said, okay, we want this guy to do that kind of thing. And then we should have gone to the agency and been like, okay, agency, can you find this guy for us? Because we can't contact him directly. What we ended up doing was going through a lot of very generic proposals. We had proposals where there would be like some fitness influencer, he would do Mon training, but we didn't really see how that fits with our game. And we also had a lot of curious incidents. We had one agency trying to get us to sign a non-circumvent agreement, which means if they suggest influencers for us to work with, and we don't take them, then we can never work with these influencers through somebody else. So that's, of course, something you should never do, right? That we would be absolutely limited. The agency could have just sent us a list of like 200 influencers, all the top people, and then we would have had to work with the agency all the time. So of course we didn't sign that. I think it's actually quite offensive to ask for that kind of non-circumvent. We also had agencies that kind of gave similar pitches using similar Excel documents, formatted in the same way. We had a lot of very generic, here's a list of 50 guys, we can get all of them for you. But we haven't actually talked to them. We just want you to sign the IO, and then we'll talk to the influencer. So that wasn't satisfying for us. So we ended up trying to do a really cool branding play with a company that wanted to put the mons in the videos, but it didn't work out for us. It kind of fell apart last minute, so we had to do sort of a fallback thing, which ended up being a lot more pragmatic and a lot less branding. And it was basically, look, we just need the impressions. We have this game update coming up. We want good guys to work with. So we ended up just giving a different agency kind of a carte blanche. This is the budget. Let's go. And that had positive and negative effects. We had some really high-profile people like Amixem, for example, which we are very happy about. But we also ended up getting a lot of smaller influencers where we didn't have so much control over what they did. And that was very painful because some of those guys even said the game isn't good or made bad remarks about our game, which, of course, is not what we're trying to get. So I think, to recap for us, the next time we will look much more closely at the individual guys. We will really try to think about what they should do for us, and then we'll try to work that out together with them or with the agency. And so, in terms of looking at the performance of all of this, of course I can't share like really in-depth detail, but I'm just going to show you these Google Play download and top grossing charts from last year. So this is basically the campaign period of August 2016 until October 2016. Gamescom was in August. We started our campaign in August. You can see the downloads rising steadily and then going up really high middle of September, which is when the TV buy really took effect. And then towards October, the very small peak is where we had all the influencers go live. Top grossing also went well for us. The game even got up to number 2 in both Germany and France, which we were very happy about. And iOS charts are very similar. I just don't want to give you too many charts. So, to kind of sum up, it's very hard to measure out-of-home advertising. It's really more about branding, believing, and about social media shares and about giving your fans something to be happy about. We can say that TV really made a big difference for us. And we also saw really high peaks with some of the influencers that we worked with. We can attribute performance to individual influencer videos because we have a tracking link under each video. And then, of course, not everybody uses that link because if you watch on your computer, but then you're supposed to download on the phone, maybe you just go to the App Store. So we also saw a pretty nice organic uplift through that time. So these are the key learnings which I just went through. So I'm just going to leave them up here. And if you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask them.
Okay, so thanks a lot, David, for your presentation. I think it was really insightful, and it was really cool that you spoke about like the negative things that didn't work as well. And I'm just thinking about how successful it was because in my office as well, in the studio, we have like a bunch of people who are really keen on the game and playing a lot. It's your fault. But one thing that's very interesting for me, I was wondering, I mean, looking at how this is an exception compared to other games that are not doing that well in the Western market and come from Korea or other Asian countries. Did you have to modify or rethink some of the visuals during marketing? Were there some no-goes like, okay, we're not going to be using these assets, or we need to downplay this theme because it's too different for us for the Western market? That would be interesting to know.
So I think we're very fortunate that Summoners War is a global success. It just happened. So it's just working. So we didn't really tweak the mons to be like very German or very French or very Western. They're just the way they are. And I think maybe the overall style of Summoner's War doesn't feel as Korean more than as it feels more Japanese, which is maybe a little bit more familiar for Western players because we all have the experience of like Super Nintendo and PlayStation RPGs, and like Japanese gaming is more closer to us. But of course, when we were talking about the spot and the visuals, we tried to pick the actors that would work well in the West and would work globally. So that's why we picked Hollywood talent, which is, you can use in US and Europe.
Hi, great presentation. Thanks. I like that it was very authentic, and you said you're very honest. And I think actually that's a key part of working with influencers, is because today we can easily see when people are being disingenuous. And so you said that you couldn't go to them directly.
We could do some.
You could do some. Okay. No, because I think it's an interesting. Okay. My question is influencer marketing. How can you advertise through influencer marketing and actually have them deliver your message in a way that's authentic and that kind of makes them because their biggest pro is that they like their audience, the audience likes them because of their style. So how can you use their style to your advantage and their honesty without actually it affecting the game in a bad way? Like you said, some people didn't like it. So how can you be sure that you're actually protecting a brand while still being honest with it?
I think it's important to talk as directly as possible with the talent. So we wasted a lot of time going back and forth with agency briefings and vendors and not being concrete about what we actually want to do. We had to overcome this, you have to sign before we even talk to the influencer kind of thing, which is really weird, and I'm hoping that's maybe gone by now. And I think that's the key. You just have to be, just have to talk about with the person or with his close representation, however that works, and really work something out together that you want to do.
Hi. My question is regarding the legal aspect of these deals. So I know in some countries that advertisers are required to actually say or visually represent that the content is sponsored by, for example, your company. So how did you deal with that in different markets?
We made that clear in every video. We made every video had a message. This is sponsored by Summoner's War. This is sponsored by Come to Us. Sometimes they would just say, by the way, this is sponsored. Sometimes they will put it in the description, so we were very upfront about that.
How does that resonate with the audience?
Depends. For some people, especially the smaller influencers, they kind of created the biggest problems and the most noise. And there, some people, some comments were like, "Oh, you're selling out," blah blah blah. The bigger guys we worked with, there wasn't really an issue at all, and people were actually happy to see Summoner's War featured by this guy because they like the game so much that they're happy that Amixem, for example, is doing something about it.
Okay, thanks.
Hey David, thanks a lot for the presentation. I happen to know a lot of the videos that were published for, so it's again a question about influencer marketing, sorry. About the videos that you published with influencers, and what I wonder is, Amixem, for example, did a video that was very well received in terms of numbers of views, but it barely contains any gameplay. The entire video is about a completely different vlog, basically, where he travels to Japan, and there's 3 minutes of gameplay in the beginning of the video. I felt that the engagement on such a video would be way lower than on a video where you focus more on the core game, even though, of course, you reach another larger audience. So what's your point on this?
So he was doing a taxi ride to his awesome fancy thing that he then did in his video log, and during the cab ride he was playing the game and talking about the game. I agree. I think it could have been done even better. It was just simply we were running out of time, and we just had to get stuff done in a pragmatic and useful way that seemed okay. And the video overall performed pretty well. We also did a different video with a guy called Julienko, which is a lot more female and younger focused. He had a lot of views, and this was just a giveaway, basically. So he also talked about different stuff, and then he showed the game for about a minute, and then we were giving away an iPhone and a Samsung phone, and that also performed really well for us. So it can work, but we just ran out of time to make really more integrated partnerships. I keep coming back to saying we need to take more time and really talk with the talent to work out something that is more meaningful for the game.
And how did you measure the success of those campaigns? Because a lot of the traffic on YouTube doesn't come through mobile devices, and you can't target effectively just mobile viewers. So what were the measures for you?
So on the one hand, of course, we have a cost per view, which is just, it's just there. But then we also have the installs that are generated through the video. And as I said, also organic uplift kind of generated in the time frame. And that was our measurement.
Thanks.
You were building a global gaming brand. How did you deal with the challenge of potentially having different target groups? That I found very interesting in different countries or even demographics. How did you build with this? How did you deal with this challenge?
So when we're talking about like approaching different countries in a different way with our marketing message, we are fortunate that the game has been out for a while. Our community is pretty strong. We have a lot of insights on what's going on in the different countries. And so for this campaign, we focused on our top markets to go even bigger. And so we hope that we found a way where Germany, France, US, we can kind of reach out with more or less the same message in the TV spot and all of that. And then try to be a little bit more individual with, let's say, the influencer marketing, which is, of course, a lot more local, because those guys, they speak German or French when they do their videos. I think last question, and then I'm going to have to call it quits. Thank you.
So, to be honest, I'm very new to the mobile market, so maybe the question is a little bit dumb, but I hope not. So, when you showed the charts about the impact of the TV campaign and Gamescom, it seemed kind of little to me in comparison to the overall downloads. Is this, I don't know, is this a usual figure? Is it low or is it high? So the percentage of the impact of the TV campaign, for example.
Let me just go back to that slide. So we went from about a top 100 download position to about top 20 downloads over 2 months. That's pretty good, because there's a significant difference. The higher you get, the harder it is to level up. It's same in top grossing. To go from like top 5 to top 1, it's a very, very big difference. And for the downloads, the same. So it's a very sneaky chart. I can just interpret it any way I want because you can't read it anyway. Okay, thank you very much. Kamsahamnida. That's it for today. Thanks.